Okay. All right. So I do not have a slide deck, a separate slide deck for today, and I don't have a separate lecture view quiz. Today we are going to spend talking about the project and how to go about finding data. That's going to be the first big and important task for you and your group, and then we'll have some time where you can talk to your classmates and perhaps start establishing groups and things of that nature. So let's talk about our project. This document will be up here, and then I will also, in the coming weeks, I will post grading rubrics for different aspects of the project. Let's see. Why is this not loading? Here we go. All right. Okay, so I don't know. I like to think the final project is a worthwhile project and learning experience. That is the goal. This is introduction to data science, and it would really feel like we're doing the class a disservice if you didn't actually get to analyze some data. And so this is the hope of the project, is to give you some real-world experience in data analysis. And so some important things is I want you to think critically about data sets and question whether the data set before you is reliable and accurate, because that's going to be important. Also, just some things about I'm going to require you to document your group meetings. I think there's merit in that. I want you to explore relationships between variables, produce visualizations, use some statistical tests, and then communicate your findings clearly. Okay, so this is the project. Final project is the kind of the biggest chunk of your final course grade, 30%. And the point breakdown is going to be as follows. There will be a proposal meeting that you will get graded on. I will ask you to document your group meetings, and that will also count for points. And then there's a final presentation that also counts. These are about 10% each. Your written technical report is going to be worth basically 70%, and part of that's going to be background information, and then part of that will be statistical tests, and then the bulk of it. So basically 150 out of the 300 points, so about half of this total project will be exploratory data analysis, and that's, I think, the most important part that I want to kind of give you in this class. And that really forms, in my opinion, the foundations of any kind of data science, is our abilities to even just start to explore and ask questions about the data before you get into like the really, with data science, we feel like, oh, there's a lot of kind of like machine learning and all of this fancy stuff. But if you can't even explore your data in the first place, what's what good is the machine learning going to do you? Okay. I want you guys, you'll have to form groups. I prefer groups of 4. I feel like 4 is kind of the right number where everybody will contribute. At 5, it starts to feel like somebody can get away with not doing a whole lot. But basically, groups of 4 or 5 will be allowed. Certainly no groups of 6. And unless something truly goes wrong, I don't want any groups of 3. Like the only time I'll allow a group of 3 is you started off with 4 and then somebody dropped the class or something like that, and then you're stuck with a group of 3. Sometimes it happens, but yeah, I don't want anybody to kind of go in plan A is a group of 3. Okay. My hope is today you'll spend some time and be able to kind of establish some groups maybe, but if you're not here, if you're watching this video, and I'll just also send out an announcement, You must have it by Wednesday of week 4. And then if you're not in a group by Wednesday of week 4, I will just assign you to a group, okay? And that will be that. I'm going to require groups to meet at least 4 times and to document these meetings. And I think this helps the, I don't want to kind of like babysit you too much, but also at the same time, the first time I did this, there were a couple groups that didn't meet at all until like 2 days before the project was due, and it really showed in the final project. So I don't want that. So I want to force you to at least meet a few times. So you have a one meeting before kind of your project proposal, and then one meeting between weeks 7 and 8, and then probably a lot of your work will be done during so at least 2 meetings there. I will I encourage you to meet more than just 4 times. So the minimum is 4 times. I encourage you to meet more than 4 times, and I will give you extra credit for meeting more than 4 times. So you'll get 2 points for every meeting above 4. So if you have 5 meetings, you'll get 2 points of extra credit. 6 meetings is 4 points, so on and so forth, up to a total of 10 points of extra credit. Okay, but yeah, your meetings, they do have to be real meetings. Okay, and you do have to kind of document them. And so to kind of I've set up just basically a little notes template. And basically, let me open this up for you. What happened? Okay. To kind of assist you and help set out. I mean, these don't have to be formal meetings. You're not like voting on stuff or anything like that. But just basically document who was there. Okay. So in attendance, whoever's there, put a little, if you're meeting Zoom, take a screen on just kind of proof of attendance, take a screenshot on Zoom or take a selfie if you're meeting in person, and then just a little summary, okay, of what happened. So whether, basically at every meeting, you should talk about, either do some work at the meeting, and then before you break up, you say, all right, this is what everyone's going to be working on, assign tasks, right? So if you assign tasks, talk about whether they were done, talk about anything that was discussed, decisions made, any tasks that were completed together. So you have meetings that are status updates, and you also have like work sessions, right? And so just document as either of these things. So work sessions are basically where you meet together and you're doing the work and you're doing the analysis together, and just document like, okay, this is what we worked on together and this is what we did, okay? Other meetings are a little bit, the status updates are a little bit shorter, where it's kind of just like, all right, everybody's gonna work on this on their own time, but let's hear, where you've made progress. So these are basically the 2 kinds of meetings that I imagine you'll have. And then, and so just put a little summary there. And then if you are going to assign tasks, assign these tasks, right? And then put in what your next meeting date is. So that's to kind of document your meetings. So that will count for points. Again, extra credit if you meet more. Okay, and then I wrote, all groups typically receive the same grade for this component. However, sometimes, you get a group member that just doesn't contribute or just, doesn't show up to these meetings. And so if an individual kind of consistently fails to contribute to attender meetings, maybe that member will have a reduced score or something like that. if you meet 5 times and you miss one meeting, that's fine, okay? But if you meet 5 times and you missed like 3 out of the 5 meetings, that's probably not okay, okay? So, all right. So there's going to be a proposal meeting. This is going to happen during week 6. I will have basically a sign-up sheet that will say, all right, this is when we want to meet. And we will meet for probably around 20 minutes via Zoom or something, okay? And this is just to kind of confirm that you have a reasonable data set. So your task, basically, once you establish your group and until you have your proposal meeting, will be to go and search for a data set that you can use and analyze, okay? And maybe just to kind of see if this is a data set that you can use and analyze, you just perform the most basic of data exploration and data just kind of like checking to see if it's kind of valid. And I'll talk about what that should go about, right? So what kind of data set should you pick? Basically, any topic, really, any topic that interests you, I'm okay with, okay? A minimum size, you have to have at least 40 observations, okay, in your data. Anything smaller than that, I'm not going to be a fan of. Okay, ideally, probably something between 300 and 10,000 observations. You know, you can have data sets that are bigger and things like that. You know, you don't get extra points for having a huge data set. And so you could get a data set that's really big with like millions of entries. That's fine. You start running into kind of like technical problems, like your computer will just be slow when you have a data set with 1 million entries in it, okay? Because every time you want to do an analysis, it's got to run over, you know, 1 million entries. And so when you have these big data things, you know, there might be some really interesting questions that you can answer, but it might be frustrating just because your computer is going to be kind of slowed down. And so, you know, there's no extra points for dealing with a data set with 1 million. This is not like a big data course where the goal is to work with these giant data sets. It's just I want you to develop these data exploration skills. So, you know, 10,000 I think is a good size because your computer can work through 10,000 really quickly. 100,000 is also probably fine. 100,000, your computer can still probably handle 100,000 just fine. 1 million is where you start really feeling, you know, I would say even like 500,000. At around 500,000 or more, your computer starts to feel sluggish as it's working through it. So. So yeah, I ideally find a data set. Okay, this is really important. Real data only. All right, no simulated data sets. There are a lot of things out on the internet where somebody posts like, oh, here's a data set, and it's just simulated. It's just like I've made up this data, right? So read your data documentation very kind of carefully. And during our project proposal meeting, I will try to read up as much as I can on whatever data set you've selected to make sure that it is real data, okay? At least one group member has to either be knowledgeable in the data or at least interested in the data's subject, okay? Which, again, you know, a popular data set out there is this wine tasting data set. And, you know, if you're going to do that, somebody in the group needs to be like, I'm really into wine, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be, you're not going to get much insight, okay? All right? If you're, you know, some of the best projects, okay? And I'm not saying you should do a sports data set, but some of the best projects have been from groups where we had one member who was like super, super, super into the sport, okay? And we probably know somebody who's like, you're like, man, you are really into that sport, right? Like they know like every single player in the entire league and things like that. And basically what they brought to the data analysis was, anytime something interesting appeared in the data, they were able to say, oh yeah, I remember this, or like, I know that person. Yeah, this is why. They're known for this thing, and they could bring this extra kind of insight. And it really kind of enhances the project. Other projects that were really, I think, done well was when, so another one that was done well was when they found like an esports data set, because the person was like really, really into, this particular, game. And so they were able to bring insight. Whereas also at the same time, one of the worst projects was a similar data set, esports. It was just that nobody really knew anything about the game. And they said, well, we have friends who play, and they asked like their friends for some advice. But when it came to the analysis, like nobody really knew what they should be looking for. Okay. And so, depending on the team analyzing the data, if you have somebody who's really into it, they can bring in a lot of insight. And if nobody's really into it, and they're just like, oh, well, I know somebody who's into it. Again, it's not the same. So at least one member has to be kind of really into. I would like for it to at least be knowledgeable or highly interested. This could be tricky, all right? Just because sometimes you get a group, and for lack of better words, like none of your interests lend itself to like data sets really well, right? Like you might be, I don't want to say anybody's boring, but it's just like you might have these interests that are really great, but it's like, oh yeah, when it comes to like searching for data, it's hard to find something, right? Like you might be super into mountain climbing, but it's like, how many mountain climbing data sets are there? I mean, I'm sure there are some, but it might be like you're into the mountain climbing and not like analyzing like, oh, these are the world record holders or something for mountain climbers. That's like a different thing, right? So that I don't want this to be super limiting and being like, oh, well, these are only our interests, and so we really limited ourselves to just these interests. Okay, just be like, at least find a data set where somebody can bring in some insight. Okay. Anyway, once you find your data set, we're going to ask how and when the data was collected, who collected it, how did they gather the data, and things like that. And, we want all of these variables to be clearly understood. Just a heads up, there's a data set on Kaggle titled Graduate Admissions, which for a lot of people, that's something interesting because a lot of students are interested in possibly going to graduate school. Okay, except there's a column called Chance of Admit. Let me see if this thing is still out there. Graduate admissions data set. Let me see. Okay, graduate admissions prediction. So this is like the graduate admissions prediction data set. Okay, and it's got stuff like the GRE score, TOEFL score, university rating, blah blah blah. Okay. And then one of these columns is chance of admit, 0.92, 0.76, 0.72, 0.8, 0.65, okay? And then, so I asked the students, like, okay, how did they figure out this chance of admit? Because as far as I know, either somebody got admitted or they didn't get admitted, okay? And it's not like, when you get admitted to UCLA, somebody's like, these are like, you have an 85% chance of admission. That doesn't exist. Either the admissions committee says you're in or you're not. And I don't know what this number means, where this number came from, who decided this number, okay? Was it like they went on a forum and they're like, what do you think my chances of admissions are? And this is just like made up, right? So nobody, like, this is not going to be a good project, okay? If you can't explain what this chance of admit is, it's not going to be a good project, right? So it's not, I would say that's not an appropriate data set because you can't explain that variable, right? before we meet in our proposal meeting, check for duplicate or missing values, check for kind of any implausible values, check for any things that are outliers, whether they should be excluded or not. Okay, and that's what that's going to be the project proposal meeting. We'll have that. Okay, let me talk about the written technical report. This is something that you don't have to worry about until a little bit later, but this is basically the bulk of the project. And the report structure, 3 parts: background information, exploratory data analysis, statistical tests and modeling. Background information is going to provide context for the topic and data set, and yeah, basically provide information about the data. Okay. I don't want just a bunch of AI generated slop. Okay. Think about it, right? Think about what actually needs to be communicated about the data, right? As far as the exploratory data analysis, this is really what I want to emphasize, and the goal is for you to do a thorough exploration and investigation of relationships within the data, and I want you to try exploring to see if those relationships exist across different subgroups. Also address any kind of data quality issues. If you have missing values, or if clean values, clean your entries or things like that, that should all go in there. And then and a big part of this is communicating what your findings, either through graphics and visualizations, summary tables, your discussions and things like that. And so here's just kind of a discussion of some of the things I want you guys to talk about. Okay, so I'll let you guys read through this, and then later on I will provide also some rubrics regarding how these things will be graded and what I'm looking for. I will also provide an example of a project in the past that I thought was good, that can kind of serve as a model for what you should strive for. There will be a final presentation, and this will be almost an hour long. We're going to say 50 minutes. It's really just maybe a 5 to 10 minute presentation, and then me spending a bunch of time reading through your report, asking you questions about your report. Okay, so I'm going to spend probably a good 40 minutes reading through your report, because your report will probably be 20 to 30 pages or something like that, and that'll take me some time to read through it. And I will read through it, and I will ask you questions and give you your grade at the end of that. Okay. All right. So let me talk about finding data, and then after I talk about how you should go about finding your data, then I will leave you with some time to meet your classmates. Okay. So as far as finding data, all right, this is the important part, is you want it to be a reliable data set. Okay, there are lots of things out there, and they may or may not be reliable. Okay, so what are some good places where you can find data? There's a lot of kind of interesting data out there available from the government. Okay, and so we have data.gov. And this is kind of a collection of different agencies that have kind of shared their data, right? And so you can get data from, say, the city of Los Angeles, data from the state of California. Maybe there's also like the county of Los Angeles, and you have all kinds of things. You got, and some of this is interesting, some of this is not. Okay, some of these things. I don't know. Oh, LA Zoo attendance. That sounds, I don't know. Okay. So, right. I'm a fan. I've got kids, and so sometimes we go to the zoo. All right. Other things that are interesting, you got the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there are some really neat data sets in here. that you can do some really interesting things. So there's a consumer price index, right? So we're all curious about like the price of eggs and things like that. And you can look that up, right? You've got tables, you got text files, and you can kind of look this up and see how has the price of eggs changed, and information about employment, unemployment, pay, things like that, how people are spending their money, how people are spending their time, stuff like that. So this is Bureau of Labor Statistics. Lots of interesting stuff there as well. Census data, the census is a big thing. And so there's the census data. This can be also super overwhelming just because there's so much. So talk about what kind of information you'd want to get, just because there's so much data available at the Census Bureau. You could really ask any kind of demographic question and get stuff. All right, there's also this National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, and this will have information, especially if you're interested in kind of like health-related stuff, things where they, what is it? Okay, so I think the most recent one, so they have information about diet. They examined, measured their things like how tall are you, but also like how long are your arms and how long are your legs and stuff like that. Some of them, they took labs where they, measured cholesterol and, all of these different things. Okay. So all kinds of stuff there if you're interested in that kind of stuff. So lots of really kind of neat things. Okay. The next one, where there's also some interesting data sets, this is Dataverse. Okay. And this is basically as people do research in the academic world with universities, and they say, hey, these are my studies and these are my findings, and this is the publication. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they share their data, and that's going to show up in the Dataverse. Okay. Now, this requires generally, it's a little bit tough to just kind of loosely navigate and find something, just because there's so many different things. Okay. But the way you would go about is like, if you overhear like, oh, there, I read a study, right? I read about some study that was conducted, right? Sometimes like in your news, you'll see like, oh, scientists, researchers find this and this and this, right? That's like a popular headline, okay? Is that like something according to Harvard researchers or something? Well, and you say, oh, that sounds interesting. I wonder if I could find the data. So, okay, you go to the Dataverse, you see if you find the data relevant to that study available in the Dataverse, and perhaps you can kind of either verify their study and see their results, and maybe there's other things, other aspects that you could investigate in their data as well. Okay, but there's kind of a lot of stuff. There's a lot of user-submitted data sets at a few different kind of data sharing sites. There's Kaggle and there's data.world. Okay, and these data sets are free and available. But just like any place where you can upload something, they vary in quality, right? And unlike a YouTube video where you can just watch the video, and in a few minutes you can determine the production quality and just be like, okay, this is somebody, this is a 13-year-old kid recording something on their phone as they're talking about it, and they don't really know what they're talking about, versus like, okay, here's actually a well-researched thing where people, we probably have some favorite creators on YouTube where, they have a whole, it's clear they have a whole team of people kind of researching stuff, writing a script and things like that, right? And that's communicated very clearly within the first few minutes of a video of like your production quality. Unfortunately, with a data set, they all just look like CSV files, okay? And so it's a lot harder but again, the production quality or like the quality of the data varies dramatically. And it could be, all right, here's just a random person who said, I scraped the internet and gathered data, and it's a total mess, all right? And here's somebody who actually put in actual effort and produced a high quality data set, okay? Except when they show up on Kaggle, they just look like CSV files. And so you have to kind of do a little bit of digging and just say like, and ask these questions. Does this make sense? Does this look like a quality data set? So there are some gems in there. There are some really good things. Unfortunately, and this could be said about anything in the world, popularity doesn't necessarily mean quality, okay? And so some of the more popular data sets, again, that Kaggle data set on graduate admissions probability, I would say is not a quality data set, because this number that says what is the probability of an admission, I don't think anybody could actually explain that. Yet it's a very popular data set for some reason, okay? So use a lot of kind of your critical thinking there, okay? There is a site called Data is Plural. It's actually like a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to, and this person just says like, oh, here are some interesting, things that came across my desk, right? And they'll link to like, oh, food safety alerts, right, or whatever, and they'll have links to something. And so as you're kind of reading some of these things, you'll say like, oh, that kind of sounds interesting, and then you can kind of click and just see what they have out there. Okay, so that's kind of a neat thing. All right, sports data. If you're into sports, these are some really good resources. So there's basketball reference, baseball reference, so on and so forth, and lots of data there. Election data. MIT runs something called the Election Lab, and they gather a lot of information. So if you're into politics and stuff like that, you can look up election data, not just presidential elections, but like local elections, lots of different things there. Okay. Other data sets out there, you can just kind of search. So pick a subject that's interesting to you. If you include CSV in your search terms, that will generally help you find files that are kind of ready to use. Again, use your judgment. Just like anything else on the internet, there's good stuff and there's trash, okay? And just be careful. You don't want to spend a ton of time analyzing junk data, okay? Some of you might have familiarity with scraping your own data. You're not, I'm not saying you're not allowed to do that. It's beyond the scope of the course. I'm not going to teach you how to do it, and you can, but if that's like the only way you're going to do it, you can also do it, okay? And these are some questions you should be asking yourself. How reputable or trustworthy is the data source? And especially if you're getting something off of Kaggle, these are some of the questions you need to ask, all right? And so there's external validation and internal consistency. I think these are some of the biggest things, all right? Having good documentation is a really good sign also. So if the data has good documentation regarding like, this is what each variable is and this is where we got it, that's a good sign. But basically, like if you come across a data set and it says something about like if there's some information that you can externally verify, you should try to verify it, okay? So if somebody says, oh, here's some information and I gathered this information about basketball players or something, okay? And it's got information about LeBron James in that data set, well, a lot of LeBron James stats and information is publicly available at other places that are reputable, like Basketball Reference or ESPN, and cross-check that, okay? And if it aligns, then that's a good sign. But if this particular data set that you have has like numbers that are wildly different, then that's a sign that this is not going to be reliable, okay? And then internally, within the data itself, if any of these things are like, okay, these are subtotals or something like that, make sure the subtotals line up, okay? Check to see if there's any kind of duplicates and stuff like that. Look for anything that are outliers. If here's a data set and it's like talking about like human height, okay? Is it saying anybody's like 12 feet tall or something like that? Okay, does it say this person was born in the year 1885? Okay, so look for things like that. Okay. Okay. So these are just my suggestions, and so that's all I have to say. I want you to question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering for the research report, what are you expecting to see in the research finding? Like, for example, I remember you talked about how the data set, what it means is very important. But if we're finding a data set of like baseball, what we can understand from the data is basically what happened to that particular game. Mm-hmm. For example, if we're finding like how medicine is affecting human growth or something like that, we can then say connect to the real world, like its importance, its value.
So I'm not expecting you to perform any kind of groundbreaking research. I'm just expecting you to do a thorough data exploration. Okay, so you have a data set, and I want you to be able to say, what kind of questions can I ask? And can I look at the data to start answering the questions? I'm not expecting strong scientific conclusions or anything like that. I want you to develop the skills of analyzing the data in terms of, can we find interesting patterns or trends? Can I do that, right? So this is, but it's not just like make a summary table, okay? But it's I want you to kind of develop these skills of thinking critically about the data, asking the right questions, and exploring it. Okay? All right. So anyway, with our remaining 10 minutes or so, take some time to meet your classmates, and hopefully you can start establishing some groups and things like that. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. But anyway, this is just kind of an introduction of the project and what you guys think about.